It's a Bulls themed episode. So I'm actually on your channel with the live chat on my phone.
Nice.
I got I got my hat here,
There you
and
go.
then
I like it.
and
I like
my
it.
bully is here too.
Nice. That's awesome,
My
man. I
French
love
bully.
it.
He was
I
also
love
crying, so I'm holding him.
it.
Let's piece these broken pieces together.
10 episodes in, and I'm delighted to have on my guest with us tonight. Today, it will be day when you guys hear it, but it was, he's a fellow Bulls fanatic. I would even say he is much more well versed on the Bulls ins and outs, any details. He has his own channel that he posts regularly, Bulls Central on YouTube. So go ahead and definitely give him a follow. Uh, we're gonna talk basketball today and writing because he's also an author. Two different worlds but related.
Very
Both
different
come
worlds. Yeah.
two different worlds, but I think they are very creative in both ends. Space Between Us was his book he came out with a couple years back. Great book. Definitely check that out. I will have that graphic right there, not above his head, but somewhere around here. Without further ado, my good friend Jamaal Aflatooni, welcome to Fumble Podcast, man.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you having me, and I love that you're doing a podcast. I've like wanted to do that as well. Definitely takes a lot of time and effort for sure. But mad
Well, you
respect for you for getting it going.
thank you, man. I appreciate it. I mean, yeah, it does take, but it becomes I think with more time, the more time I've spent on it, I'm realizing I can now start to focus more on like the real reasons why I'm doing it.
Yeah,
Like figuring out like the ins and outs, the technological parts of it, right? And then I'm sure you can relate from being having a YouTube channel. So but I'm starting to be able to actually like not have to worry about like, oh, is my mic working, is this working, and all that, right? So the first few episodes where I had those challenges, but anyway, yeah, it's good, and I always wanted to do it. But more important than Fumble Podcast right now is the Bulls are playing right now, and I have
they
taken
are. They're
you.
about they're about to start for sure.
They're about to start, and I've taken you away from that. So,
No, it's all good,
uh,
man. No worries at all.
so let's talk about some Bulls basketball. Both of us, I think that was one of our first commonalities back when we met at UC Davis, I believe. But when I learned that you were a Bulls fanatic, there are not that many of us in California.
It's
so
true. It's
so
true.
so
Maybe
and
in the
then
'90s there were, but maybe not so much anymore, right?
and that's where my fandom started, I would say.
Yeah, for
And I
sure.
put my bulldog here, my French bully, as a theme. But anyway, would you say your fandom started back in the '90s as well, than during the Jordan and Pippen era?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think for me, the very first Bulls game that I remember as a kid was actually the 1992 finals.
Wow.
The reason I remember that is because my dad was very much into it because they were playing the Blazers at the time, and we lived in Oregon,
There you go. Yeah, I was
and
going to get into
so
that. Yeah.
yeah, that was like all the craze at that time. And
Yeah.
that's actually the last time the Blazers have actually been to the finals. And so I remember, I think I was around 6 or 7 at the time, and thinking like, wow, this is like a really fun game to watch because it's
Yeah.
very high, fast paced, and a lot of action, and you could tell people would get really passionate about it. And even myself, I found like I was getting passionate about it, even though I knew nothing about the game at the time.
Yeah.
And then my mom's
How old were
side
you
of
at this time? If
I
I
was
can
like
interrupt
I
you.
was like 6 or 7 or so.
Yeah, sounds right. I was the same.
Yeah, and my mom's side of the family, they're all from Chicago. They still all live there, and so when we used to go there, we would go there like twice a year. Even still, not recently in the pandemic, we haven't been traveling there, but normally we would go there about twice a year. And as a kid, they were all huge Bulls fans because they're from there, and it was in the '90s, and so naturally, I kind of picked up on that as well. And as a kid, you fall in love with Michael Jordan, I mean, like he globalized the sport, right? So yeah, that's really where my fandom started, and I just kind of stuck with it from there. I'm like one of these people where it's like, once if I become a fan of something very early on, I just kind of stick with it. I would feel absolutely weird, even when the Bulls aren't doing well, to like all of a sudden be a fan of a different team. It's just like weird to me. But I know some people do it. I know people, they go from team to team with whoever's doing well at a given time.
I think I know some of those same people. But so Bulls though, right? So Chicago, your family was from there, your mom's side, you said. And just the Bulls, not the Bears, not not the hockey teams, the Blackhawks.
No, not. I mean, the thing is it has nothing to do with the location. Although I mean, if I had to choose like a second favorite team for football, sure, maybe the Bears, but all of the other teams that I follow when it comes to baseball or football, they're all the Northwest teams where I grew up in Oregon. So I don't really follow NFL that much, but Seahawks would probably be my team. Baseball, I do follow. I'm a Mariners fan. Hockey, I never really got much into. It just wasn't really my thing. I like it. I respect the sport. I mean, it takes a lot of talent to be able to skate on ice and still juggle a puck and fast the speed at which they operate. I mean, it's really a really skillful sport, but I just never really got into it.
I feel you. Did you play basketball as a kid? Was it a sport that you played yourself as well?
Yeah, basketball and soccer, those were my two sports. I would say I was probably better at soccer as a kid. It's not that I wasn't good at basketball, it's just that my dad, growing up in Iran, that was the only sport that they ever really played. And so, he taught me the soccer from a very, very early age. And he likes basketball. I mean, that's what got me into it, because he was watching Blazers versus Bulls in that finals in 1992. But he didn't really know a lot about the game. Right. So whereas like my dad very early on would start getting me involved in soccer. He was one of my coaches for like our youth team. But my dad didn't know enough about basketball to like really become a coach for basketball, like youth kids. So because he wasn't as into it as he was in the soccer, I didn't really perfect, like the skill of being a basketball player as much as I probably did in soccer. But yeah, those were my two sports that I played growing up as a kid.
That's cool, man. You definitely have you have a height for a nice point guard. You know what I mean? We played a few years back. I think it was my birthday.
That was like the first time I played basketball in so long. That was crazy. Was that for your birthday, or? I
think it was my birthday. Yeah, we thanks to Shada, she organized all of it and we all met up. That was fun, man.
That was fun.
That was a fun. And I know the ladies were really cold because it's December, so I'm a December. But thanks for the sacrifice, everyone. But yeah, so you were born in Oregon? Am I getting that right?
I was actually born in Arizona, but I moved there when I was really young. So
really young.
But for all intents and purposes, I grew up in Oregon. Yeah, I
grew
moved
up
there when I was like 5. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the Blazers and the Bulls from '92, man, I remember that. I was probably like 6. I guess we're the same age. Yeah, I was probably 5 or 6. And then, but you were living in Oregon, and from that moment on, you were falling in love with Michael and the Bulls, even though you're Oregon kid essentially. What you weren't a fan of the Trailblazers at that time, or?
No, not really. And it was hard living in Oregon and being a Bulls fan, because you have to understand, in that time there were a lot of Bulls fans,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah,
a lot of Bulls fans uh, came about throughout the entire country
yeah. Uh-huh.
purely because of Michael Jordan.
Of course, yeah,
But when you're living in Oregon, and there's literally, well, I guess at the time Seattle Sonics still existed, but now they don't.
yeah,
But you're living in Oregon, and that's like, the only professional Oregon sport team. Not anymore, but at the time, because
right,
now they have a soccer team.
yeah,
Um, yeah, people were really hardcore Blazer fans at
yeah,
that time.
yeah,
Then things kind of fell by the wayside once Clyde Drexler had moved on. They weren't
yeah,
as good anymore. So um, there were a lot of Bulls fans, but not really in Oregon. So I was definitely one of the like few. And in school, I mean, you're a little kid, everyone's wearing all their Blazer stuff, and I was one of the few kids that always like wore my Bulls
yeah.
attire to school. And it was all like playful sports bantering. It wasn't like they were giving me a hard time too much for it. And at the end of the day, it's like, we had Michael Jordan, we were winning championships, they weren't. So
Yeah,
it's like, what are they going to say at that point? But
I
yeah.
know, I know. I remember specifically from that series, and we'll come back to your time growing up as a Bulls fan in enemy's territory, essentially. um, and but I just remember one of the things I always remembered was that one game, and you'll have to correct me on the which game it was, but when Jordan just started hitting threes,
Oh yeah.
and he
The
was
shrug, the
just,
shrug game.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And by the way, they talk about all of this in the Last Dance documentary, and
Yeah, yeah.
and that's something I wanted to get into as well, because I mean, um, which game was the first game that you watched? Was it game one, or was it
I mean, I was so young that
yeah,
I don't know if it was game one, and I don't think it was the shrug game either. I
yeah,
want to say it was a game that Portland was playing at home, and the
okay,
Bulls had home court advantage that
yeah,
that in that series. So
yeah,
it must have been like a game 3 or 4,
got it,
something
got
like
it.
that. Yeah, yeah. It was one of those things where you you wanted to understand. Oh, actually, something that was really funny was that I remember at the time thinking that you know what they're doing is like a computerized game. In other words, I thought that something was being controlled, like they weren't playing of their own volition. I thought like, oh, it's like a video game, like
Yeah,
I saw video games back in the day. There were
yeah.
basketball video games, and I thought, okay, so it's all just like someone's playing them, like they're not
Oh
actually
wow,
playing the sport. I
yeah.
mean, for like a brief moment, and then my dad had explained that no, these are like real people. They're like playing. It's like you
Yeah,
see them on TV. It's like, oh, it's just they're someone's playing them. But
it's amazing.
anyway, yeah, that's kind of a random tangent. But yeah, I don't remember which game it was. That was my very first game, but it was just that series, and I remember just like falling in love with the sport as a result of it.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, the I mean, same. The 91 season, I was still too young to process.
Same.
Yeah, yeah, I was too young to process that this is gonna be, or even the 80s, the late 80s, the wars they had with the Pistons,
Oh, the Pistons, yeah,
the
yeah.
Bad Boys Pistons. Oh man. So yeah, um we had similar experiences, I think, with discovering the Bulls around the same time, just two different parts of the world, because I was still in Iran at that time.
Right.
I was born in Iran, but yeah, I was 6. I mean, I left Iran in 95. That's when Jordan wasn't playing. So that was the year he was
Oh,
off,
right.
right? He hadn't come back yet. He was playing baseball. So when I moved to the States in 95, I was living in Maryland at the time. So just to kind of give you like perspective of like where I was. You were in Oregon, West Coast, I was in the East Coast. But I like the Bulls, man. I still like the Bulls just like you. And um this was the Houston Rockets year to win it. And then that
Mhm.
was in 95, 96, I believe. And then Jordan returned, or 94, 95. And then Jordan
Yeah.
returned with number 45, which I still can't find that jersey. It's really
Oh,
expensive.
you had one? You had a
No,
45 jersey?
I want it. I want one. I want one.
Oh, I see.
I'm
Yeah,
saying
you're
I
probably
still
not gonna be
can't
able to
find.
find it now. Yeah,
I know. I know.
for sure.
The 45 jersey. But so anyway, I just recall like resuming my fandom like after switching countries, and there's just and I fell in love with basketball at such a young age, and um I never had the confidence to play it at the level that I eventually ended up playing after high school. But like just growing up being a foreigner, like a real foreigner, like out of like out of state essentially, and then adjusting to schooling in the United States, and then just having to figuring out like the language, figuring out the culture, figuring all that out, and then in the middle of all that, trying to keep up with sports. I always loved sports, but I wrestled mostly in high school. So anyway, um, long-winded way of saying that I resumed my fandom in 95, 96, and then the Bulls just started winning again for 3 more championships. And
Did basketball start getting popular in Iran around that time period? Because
so
I know
yeah,
that at least when my dad was there, which was in the 70s,
right.
basketball was not. I mean, they had it, right?
Yeah.
Like, people
Yeah.
played it, but it wasn't that popular.
It
was
was
mainly
not
soccer.
exactly. And I think the Bulls, I mean specifically Michael, he paved the way for that sport to go international the way it did, and specifically in Iran, because like you said, Iran was either a soccer
or wrestling, right?
or wrestling, and that's what I did. I wrestled. I played soccer too, and I was horrible at soccer. I'm probably one of the few. I'm one of the few Persians that is really bad at soccer, and so, and I never really fell in love with soccer the way I gravitated towards basketball. Similar sports in concept, right? If you break it down, I mean, 11v11 versus 5v5, but the goal is to get the ball in the basket or a goal. And of course, a lot of Iranians that I grew up around at that time, but whether it be my uncles or my cousins, the cousins that were near my age, they loved basketball too, because they were kind of raised here, so they got the thrill of it. But my uncles and them never really cared for basketball specifically. Like, they'd watch it, but they didn't care for it because it was too high scoring, because they enjoyed
interesting.
They enjoyed like that fight, that's blood, sweat, and tear to get that one goal in soccer.
Right.
Or and then later on, my uncle he's a fanatic Washington football team fan, and so he loves American football and he loves soccer, but basketball for him is like he understands the like why it's so popular, but he just never got into it. But that was the reason. It was the scoring. But hockey, he doesn't like hockey either. So I'm like, well, hockey is kind of like what you would enjoy, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you grew up in Oregon. I didn't forget. You grew up in Oregon, and then you're a Bulls fan, and I'm sure kids, like what kids do, they did their share of trash talking, but it's interesting to me that from that young of an age, you were like, you knew, like, you're not from Chicago, like you don't live in Chicago. Obviously your mom was from there, but you didn't really veer away from being a Bulls fan. And what kept you going, like even going into your teenage years when the Bulls kind of were in rebuild mode after 98?
I mean, I think I also just like the game in general. So it's good to, it's one thing to be a fan of a specific team, but if you don't really like the game or the sport itself,
of course,
it's kind of hard to stay, vested in like the team.
That has to come first, you would think, right? I mean,
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, what kind of kept me through even the really, really bad years after Jordan retired was just the fact that, like, I liked watching basketball. And if I'm going to watch basketball, well, I'm going to watch the team that at least, I consider myself to be a fan of, even if they're not necessarily good anymore. Because at that time, obviously, I had never experienced a team that was bad, or my team being bad, because ever since I had started following the Bulls from when I was a kid, they were always winning championships. I mean, there was, the 2 years that Jordan retired, but even then they were still decent with
Yeah.
Scottie Pippen.
They were
leading the way.
competing. Yeah.
Exactly. And so once Jordan retired, I mean, they became one of the worst teams in the league, and for a long time. I mean, it was hard because, you don't want to watch a team that's just constantly losing. Like, that's not
No.
fun as a fan to watch. But I think what kept me sort of going was that there was also, I love the business side of the NBA and how they go about rebuilding and constructing a team
Oh
with
yeah.
salary cap through the draft. So even though they were not good, I always found it interesting to see, well, what are they doing to get good? What are they doing to actually build this team back to contention? And obviously, I wasn't happy with a lot of the moves that the front office made throughout those years, but it kept you interested. It's like, okay, well, I wonder, what kind of trades they're going to make to make this team better. If they're needing someone that's more focused on playmaking versus someone that's more of an outside shooter.
Mhm.
Also, are they going to try to intentionally lose so that way they can get a higher draft pick? Like, all that stuff was really fascinating to me, even when the team wasn't doing well, because I still wanted to understand, well, there's going to be a path forward. There's going to be a future that is bright. And that's what kind of makes you like motivated to keep wanting to follow.
Right.
Granted, the Bulls still haven't won the championship since then. So you always think, oh, well, it's going to happen one of these days. And even, to this day, I still say that to myself quite a bit. But
we had the team to do it, man, in like 2008, 2009. But I wanted to kind of, so you're talking about the business side, and at what age did the business side of this whole ordeal like spark your interest?
I mean, probably like, 17, 18.
Okay, so you're semi-adult now by this point.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't say it's to the extent that I know it now.
Yeah.
It's just when I understood the concept of like, oh, there's a salary cap. Oh, they like trade players. They exchange things in a way. It's not like they're commodities, and I don't like how I want to view it that way, like they are being commodities, but in a way they are, because they're obviously human beings. But when it became more of like a business transaction and, holding on to assets and capital, draft capital, things like that, that made it very fascinating to me, because before, when you're a kid, it's just like, oh, these guys are really good at basketball. And I like watching basketball. And then I remember as a kid also, when they would like, when players wouldn't return to the team. Well, why like what happened to BJ Armstrong? Why is he no longer with the team? What happened to Horace Grant? And then my dad would explain, well, they got traded. What do you mean they get traded? Don't they just stay with the same team always? So when like I started understanding that there was a business component to the NBA, that also made me more interested in the sport as a whole. I mean, because the sport of basketball, the game itself is very fascinating, but then to me also the actual league itself and how it's constructed and how they make money and generate revenue, then it became more like a profession to me that I find very, very interesting. So yeah, I think it was probably like 17 or 18 or so when I really started getting more into that.
But there's a lot of people who actually are turned off by the NBA because of the business, right? So it's interesting to me that it actually elevated your attraction to the game, or the NBA specifically, and then the Bulls. But like, would college basketball bring, like, see a lot of people who don't care for the business side of it, or they think there's only like a handful of teams that are always winning, that make that argument, and they say, oh, because they're in better cities, the marquee cities, and this and that. And there, as a lot of them will come to me and say, oh, you watch NBA, you got to watch college basketball. They don't, because and I do watch college ball. But to me, I like the glitz and glamour of the NBA. Like, I enjoy that, and I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on college versus NBA?
So I definitely like college. So I was actually a huge college basketball fan when I was in college, and even a little bit going, even before I entered college in high school. And it's very different because I like the college atmosphere that exist within
Right,
basketball.
right.
There's a lot more passion and motivation for the players because they're not playing for money.
Yeah,
They're playing because either they want to get to the NBA, they're trying to get better. There's more excitement, in my opinion. I mean, other than like NBA playoffs, but it is exciting in the sense that fans are much more involved and engaged at college basketball games than they are, say, at an NBA game. But for me, it's also the difference in the level of play. Like when you watch college basketball, it's like, and these guys like turn the ball over a lot. They miss a lot of shots, and it's because they're not professional basketball players.
Right,
So
right.
I prefer watching basketball when it's played at the highest level.
I got you.
I do appreciate like the energy and the passion that comes from college basketball. Sometimes I actually get annoyed about that in the NBA because like you watch a game, like I've been to live games, right? We went to a live game
That's
together.
right. That's right.
And I went to a live game at the United Center, and it was like, people are just kind of passively watching, kind of clapping here and there. I mean, you go to a college game, every possession, people are on their feet screaming and shouting, right?
Yeah.
It's just different. So that's one aspect that I don't like about it. And I think because a lot of people, when it comes to NBA, they kind of treat it more of just like an outing, a social gathering.
It's a show.
People that maybe it's a show, right?
Yeah.
For people who maybe aren't necessarily as big of fans. And because I'm such a big fan, I get really into it. So it's like different for me, right?
I know. I'm the same way, man. I'm to the level that I annoy Shada sometimes. She's like, you care too much. But that's, I think is the whole college atmosphere. I mean, part of that is because, you got all of the, the kids that are in school, they're jumping on to these games, right? Or whether it's at the game or watching it on TV. But we're talking about the live atmosphere. I mean, it's religious almost, right? They're looking at it as like, I mean, again, growing up in Maryland, I was really into college basketball.
Sure.
When Maryland and Duke,
Maryland Terrapins.
the Terrapins and Juan Dixon, right? He was back in the day. He was a great college player, right? They didn't transition to the NBA. Steve Blake,
Blake too. Yeah,
everybody thought, or Lonnie Baxter, like all of these guys that were in that glory year of Terrapins. I think 2002 was when they won. But like I remember that rivalry was real, like Duke and Maryland, like at those years. And I was a Bulls fan at that time. And so it was almost painful when Bulls were drafting the Duke players, right? I was like, no, like don't draft.
They drafted. I feel like they drafted a lot, right? It was like Elton Brand, Chris Duhon, Luol Deng. Yeah, there was quite a few in that time period that you were
in
there,
that time period.
A lot, yeah.
And specifically though, like there was that specific rivalry between and he got I can't even remember his name, motorcycle accident, and it took him out.
Jay Williams.
Jay Williams. And he was in that game, the Duke versus Maryland, when Maryland beat them, right? And so to me, it was like I was torn. I was like, I don't want to cheer for him. Anyway, his career got cut short. But but yeah, so it was just the college factor like was more real for me there. When I moved to the West Coast, when I moved to Cali, it was it kind of faded away a little bit. Those smaller states, I think, I feel like there's more they hang on to their teams a lot, more with more passion. I mean, it's no secret, like the Philly fans and like the fans in the East Coast are
East Coast fans, they're so much more passionate about.
They're rabid, man.
Like Austin, are you kidding me? Like, oh man, it's a different beast, that's for sure, than where they are in the West Coast. Definitely.
I know. So yeah, you and I got spoiled with some championships in our early childhood, and then we had to go through the rebuild, and then seeing like the initial years, seeing Scottie Pippen in a Houston jersey was painful. Then seeing Dennis Rodman with the Lakers, and then
don't even remind me.
He kind of I mean, at that stage, Dennis was 1 foot out of the door by that point. Sure. But anyway, So then what happened? Like, where was your competitive juice at when, and I have nothing but respect for Kobe Bryant, right? Amazing player, great player. And I mean, I would even say he's up there with Michael, essentially like 1, 2. And I'm not going to get into who's one, who's two, but and God rest his soul. But he when I was a kid and I was in my teenage years in the early 2000s, and I'm seeing Kobe come up with Shaq, and then they got Phil, and they were
Yeah,
getting making people forget about the Bulls for a little
they
bit,
were. Yeah.
and it was painful. I had friends that in Maryland at the time who were, they were extreme hardcore Laker fans, and
Yeah.
and then we
Well,
were
and a
all
lot of those Bulls fans transitioned to Lakers fans too,
that
like
is
it's
true.
like
That is
they
true.
basically, because like you said, they got Phil Jackson and they started, going on three-peats like the Bulls did. I mean,
I
they had the
know.
one three-peat and then they almost did it again later on. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was tough. And
It-
and I can't stand the Lakers. I've never been a Lakers fan.
yeah.
My what's ironic is my dad is a huge Laker fan because when he first came to this country,
Yeah.
that was right at the height of Magic Johnson, Kareem,
Oh wow.
and so he just fell
Did
in
your
love with the team and
did your
fell in love
dad
with the
move to
sport.
LA or to Oregon initially?
My dad actually initially came to Oklahoma.
Oh
Um,
wow.
for some reason, a lot of Iranians went to Oklahoma. I don't know.
I've heard of this actually. Yeah.
I
I
don't know
know a
why.
few.
Yeah, initially went to Oklahoma, and then went to Idaho for pharmacy school. My dad's a pharmacist, and then
Okay.
the Arizona, and then that's where I was born. And then yeah, and then
Right,
Oregon.
Arizona. But
Yeah.
he was a Lakers fan throughout. Well, it makes sense. I mean, the same reason we got became Bulls fans, right? Like,
Yeah, right. It's like he never was in LA, but he just, he came to this country not really knowing a lot about basketball, but saw everyone loves this guy, Magic Johnson, Kareem. He loved the style of play, the Showtime Lakers. And I mean,
yeah,
kind of like me, he just stuck with the team, even through the down years. They haven't really had that many down years, but
that's true.
they've been more or less pretty good. He's just stuck with the team ever since.
I'm gonna say this. I like the Lakers a little more now than I did back in the early 2000s.
Yeah, it's different now. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like him a little bit more now. It's because I also like LeBron James.
I
I know
agree.
a lot
Yeah,
of Bulls fans cannot stand LeBron James, but you got to have respect for like his longevity.
yeah,
The fact that he at his age, the number of years that he's played in the league, the number of games under his belt, that he's still playing at a superstar level. I mean, that's like unmatched.
I
Michael
know.
Jordan couldn't even do that, right? I
No,
mean, I know he took some years off, but when you're playing, when you're in your I think the 17th or 18th season in the league,
yeah,
and you're still arguably the best player in the entire league. I mean,
yeah.
that's something else. But
I
yeah,
mean, I also associate the science of rehabbing after games is, I mean, extremely advanced nowadays, right?
yeah, for
And
sure.
Kobe started to, I mean, he played 20 years, right? Kobe did.
Yep,
And he was able to tap into that to a degree. But
yeah,
it's true though. I mean, we even with all that, with all the advancement, it's amazing to see. Um, but I would say with going back to the Bulls, the the like I would say from 99 to around 2006, 2007, I was just always just watching, all right, who are we drafting this year, right? It was kind of one of those deals like
it
we
was
just
that was like our Christmas present. All right, let's hope we get the number one pick, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. But then we get Derrick Rose, right? And
Yep,
then we get Rose in the draft, and he just explodes right off like into this superstardom player. We start and then we had Noah, right? And we had Luol Deng, like we
hmm
mentioned, and we had this core that was so solid. And then we started competing with the bests in the East, and then we were beating LeBron James teams at the
yeah,
Cavaliers at the time, even Miami Heat. And
yep,
then and so like um I was like that childhood in me was gonna get coming back. I was like, wait, are we about to do this? Like I
yeah,
felt, when we became the number one seed heading into that year when we had
hmm
the number 8 seed Philadelphia Sixers. And then what and then Rose goes up for that layup, and he comes down and he goes down. I just felt like this is like this can't be good. Like I knew what I knew he was hurt. I didn't know to what extent it was going to be, and then
Right.
from that point forward, leading to all the demise and all like the bad luck and the injuries, the repeated injuries with Rose, and then eventually him leaving. Where was your head at the height of where we were? Like we were like a 60+ win team every year at that point. What were you thinking in those moments?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, we got really lucky getting Derrick Rose.
Yeah.
So that year that we got that number one pick, I think the Bulls had like a 1.8% chance of actually landing the number one pick that
The
season
lottery, right? Yeah.
in the lottery. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they got incredibly lucky. And so I was obviously ecstatic because, in my opinion, he was the best player in that draft class. He wasn't a consensus number one, but it was, like he's probably going to be number one. Very similar to this year, how Anthony Edwards wasn't the consensus number one in the draft, but most people thought that he would go number one. It was kind of one of those situations.
Yeah.
And once I knew that they got the number one pick, and because he was from Chicago, I was like, it's a done deal. They're going to get Rose. So I was really excited. And then obviously he had an amazing rookie season.
Yeah.
And then just continued to get better and better. He won the MVP, the youngest
Yep.
MVP to ever win that award. And in that game, what's funny is that in that game, and I remember it very vividly, of course, I had actually just moved to the Bay Area. So this is I already got to the Bay Area. I moved to the Bay Area around 8 or 9 years ago, and I was watching the game, and that season, Rose, throughout that season, he was getting injured here and there. You know what I mean? Like he would take some weird falls, and he would be out for 5-10 games. But the Bulls were still able to maintain, and they were able to keep the best record in the league that year, just like they did the season prior. And so when he fell there, I actually thought, I was worried, obviously, and I was like, he's probably going to have to miss a couple games.
Yeah.
Because that's what had been happening throughout
Right.
the season. Is maybe it's just another minor tweak like he had kind of been having. So when it happened, I wasn't as devastated as maybe most people initially were, because I didn't think that it was going to be that serious, and I don't think I really understood like the severity of the situation of what had just happened until obviously he was brought back to the locker room. There had started coming out reports even shortly after that it's possible that he's torn his ACL. And once it's the ACL, that, they're out for a good 8 to 12 months, and probably minimum, most likely more than that.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was out longer than that too. So once I found that news, I was like, that's it. Although what I will say though is that I knew it was it as far as them making any progress in the playoffs for that season, but I actually thought he was going to recover, just because of the sheer explosiveness and how great of a player he was, that I figured, okay, he's gonna be out for probably a year or so, and he's gonna come back as good as he was before. Which was naive of me to think that. So I was obviously, down by the fact that he was out, but I was like, the Bulls can still recover after this because he's still a very young player. It wasn't like this was D Rose going down with an ACL injury at the age of like 30. He was only, I think, 23 or 22 at the time. And so when that happened, I was like, okay, like there's still plenty of time to recover. Like Noah was still young. Deng was still relatively young. They had Boozer, who, wasn't old, but he wasn't young either. So it was like, this team still has time left in the tank to make another run at a championship. And they actually really tried, right? But then Rose got injured again. Jimmy Butler started to flourish, which was great. And it just nothing ever really materialized. It worked out for them, whether it was through injuries. Then they fired Tom Thibodeau, which was horrible decision, and then just kind of went from there. And then, like you said, they traded Rose after they realized he's probably not going to be the same player that he used to be.
That injury, though, the first injury that when he fell, and you said you weren't as shocked, because there was like a pattern of that all year.
Yeah.
For me, as soon as I heard that it was an ACL tear, I actually, though I knew it was been a long recovery period, I actually started thinking about Adrian Peterson, because he had just recovered.
Yeah.
I had just thought about him, and it was football, which is even a more bigger contact sport, and he had come back miraculously like in 8 or 9 months, right? Like pretty
Yeah.
quickly. And he
Yeah.
was kicking butt. Like he came back and he was like on top of the league again. So that's where I found my optimism. But then, of course, then there was a chain of injuries, and then it eventually went south. But
Yeah.
like Derrick Rose, just like Michael, I feel like there are a few of those uh superstar Bulls players, like the initially being with the Bulls, that I was still looking at them as Bulls players even after they left, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, Michael being one when he went to the Wizards, right? I mean, I was like, I was still cheering him on, and I lived in Maryland, so that wasn't that
Sure.
far.
Sure.
The
Yeah.
Washington Wizards, I was like, oh, he came to me. But yeah,
Yeah.
so like I was cheering him on, and he was playing at that point like in his early 40s, I would say, or late 30s. But anyway, with Rose, like when he left, right, I think he went to New York, and then he got bounced around, and all fast forward to when he was on the Timberwolves, and then he got that 50 piece,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and he was crying. I felt every emotion of that man.
Yeah.
I like, because I had followed, I knew what he was feeling,
What he had gone through.
what
Yeah.
he had gone through, because I was so involved in the initial injuries, and then that climb back, right? And many people say, because he's still balling hard right now, and
Yeah.
and and he's like probably at 80% of what he could have been, right, if he wasn't injured, or probably less. But I always see these posts saying if the Rose didn't get injured, he could have arguably been the best player to ever play the game. And we can never,
Yeah.
like confidently say that, because it's up for debate. But I
I don't
just,
know if he would have been the best player to ever play the game. I've heard that before
yeah,
too,
yeah,
right? And people saying like, "Oh, he would have been the greatest of all time." Um, I wouldn't go that far because
yeah,
there were a lot of aspects about Rose's game that I don't think you could qualify him as being the
uh,
greatest player to ever play. Um, Part of it was his defense. Not that it was bad defense by any means, but it's like you look at a guy like Michael Jordan, who was a defensive player of the year, but
yeah.
then also an absolute beast on offense,
I
right?
know.
And the guy always averaged over 30 points per game.
Yeah,
Even at MVP Derrick Rose, he was averaging 25 points per game, and he was a decent playmaker as well. I do think he would have had the chance to be the best player in the league,
yeah,
definitely,
yeah, yeah,
had he
yeah,
not got injured. I think he would have surpassed LeBron, and he would have been the face of the NBA. And he probably would have gone down as an all-time great.
yeah,
But to say that he would have been like the best player to ever play the game
yeah.
if he
It's a
hadn't got
stretch.
injured, I mean, you're right. We would never know, right?
We would
Because
never know.
the guy became an MVP at 22.
Right,
Like
right.
that doesn't happen. Like
That
Michael
doesn't
Jordan
happen.
couldn't even do that, right?
Yeah,
So it's like most players when they're at 22, they're still trying to figure things out. And guys sort of enter into their prime when it's like 23, 24, 25.
yeah.
He was already at that peak at age 22. So
I know.
yeah, I mean it's possible and we'll never know. And that's what is like the most unfortunate thing about Rose getting injured is
Yeah,
that there was so much potential and promise there. And it was just all taken away from injuries. That's what makes sports so
and
hard,
it does.
is like injuries because it's not something you can control and you never know. Like you can have an amazing team and you think like, hey, we're doing everything right. We put all the pieces together to formulate an amazing basketball team, and it can all just be taken away just from a major injury. But
I mean, I'm thinking of Oregon again, and I'm thinking of Greg Oden. I mean, he didn't even have
right,
it. He didn't even have a chance to have a career. Like, I mean,
right,
that was hard to watch too.
yeah,
Yeah, injuries suck, man. And then it's like, and it's not like I mean, it's luck. It's honestly just luck. And financially looking at it, it's look at Isaiah Thomas, right? I mean,
the second Isaiah
the
Thomas,
second
yeah,
Isaiah
yeah,
Thomas, not
yeah, for
not the
sure,
bad not the bad boy Isaiah Thomas, but
yeah,
the Boston Celtic Isaiah Thomas, when
yeah, yeah.
he flourished, and at his size to do that, that was quite remarkable. But again, hip injury, and then look at him now, right? He's getting 10-day contracts. Like, it's hard to watch.
Off, yeah.
DeMarcus Cousins, another one. Like, we're watching all of these guys who who were amazing when they
Yeah.
hit their peak, and then one injury later, and that Achilles injury for DeMarcus really messed them up.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well, and
anyway,
you living in Sacramento, I mean, I'm sure DeMarcus Cousins was like all the craze in that entire city. I mean, he was the face of that franchise for a long time,
I
at least
know.
until he got traded anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. When he got traded, I mean, but that's where the arguments come in, right? Like there are certain teams, they're just kind of hotbeds for making players and then sending them off to a competitive team, right?
Right.
And that's what the argument was with the Kings. It's like, oh, the Kings are they're just there to create, like, develop players, and then they're off. I don't know if it's true because the Kings were competing in the 2000s, right? So
They were, yeah.
yeah. So it was, and I was watching that against the Lakers, and that. But anyway, we we both share the passion for basketball enough where we can sit down and talk about the sport, and not just the Bulls. We can talk about all other teams too. But I want to take us to your YouTube channel, and what got you, because you're a parent. It's not a secret to me anyway, but you're a parent now. You're happily married to a good friend of mine, and that's how we met initially. Um, and you wrote a book a couple years ago, which, again, Space Between Us. Definitely go check it out. It's a great book. And what I, always being a Bulls fan, what kind of made you think, I want to start, maybe I should start a YouTube channel and regarding the team, the present
Yeah.
team.
You're not gonna believe this, but my wife actually suggested that I do it.
No way.
Yeah, she knew that I mean, obviously she knows that I'm very passionate about the Bulls and
Yeah.
basketball in general,
Yeah.
and she would notice that anytime I would have like a conversation with someone about basketball, she's like, "You seem to know, like you really know what you're talking about." And I was like, "Well, not really. I just, you know, you probably don't know like the dynamics of basketball. I'm just talking about anything that anyone else would probably know." And she's like, "Well, why don't you like, start a podcast or start a YouTube channel?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know. It's not really for me, and I don't know if I would have the time for that. And who would actually want to listen to me anyway?"
Me.
And she's like, "Well, you're not going to know unless you try." And so when the pandemic hit, we were afforded with the luxury of time. I mean, as much time as one can have being a parent, but when she's asleep, she goes to bed early. Kids go to bed early, and it's not like you can just go out and do stuff. It's like, okay,
Right.
well, let me like fiddle with this a little bit. Let me like watch like what some other people are doing on YouTube, and seeing what how they've been successful. What kind of tools do I need to order? Do I need to get a microphone? Do I need to get download software for like
Yeah.
video software and editing and things like that? And so I just did like a lot of research on it and thought, well, it doesn't seem that difficult. Let me try it out and see how it goes. And yeah, I tried it out, I don't know, about 5 months ago or so. And so far it's been great. I mean, I actually really, really enjoy doing it. It sounds like it's a lot of work, but for me, because I know Bulls basketball so well,
Yeah.
that it just kind of comes naturally to me, at least to talk about it, right? The video editing aspect of it is a little bit different. And I don't really focus on the video aspect of it as much, because for me it's more about the dialogue. It's just that, as like background stuff here, watch some highlights while I talk, because I doubt people just want to see me talk to them on YouTube. But yeah, it's been working out really well, and that was kind of the basis for why I wanted to start the channel, was because my wife suggested that I do it, and yeah, I tried it out, and so far it's been going well.
Well, I mean, the topics you bring up are riveting, because they're things that not. I mean, and we already it's talked about how I'm also a Bulls fan, and I know other Bulls fans, and I don't like the topics you bring up are riveting in the sense that you remind the fan, like, what's important as far as, like, the Bulls now, past, and future. Like, you kind of
Right.
this you've talked about many of the history of the Bulls. Like, your initial videos were more focused on that, and you
Hmm.
kind of brought it up to present day with the current roster, and then You even had an April Fool's one, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
That was good. Um, but what I how do you so it do you see yourself going, because again it's what you already did anyway, and that's I think the point is the passion was already there. You didn't think YouTube first and then passion, it was the other way around.
Right.
um and that's cool that your wife was the motivator there. That's awesome. So what do you how do you come up with your topics, like when you're sitting down to record? Do you how do you organize it? Is it something like that just comes to mind and you're like, oh, I should post this, or is it
Yeah,
how does it work?
it's not even something I can like you said, it's just kind of more of what just comes to mind.
Okay.
Because a lot of it is like stuff that I used to always think about in general, just as like to myself as a
Yeah.
Bulls fan.
Yeah.
I wonder if they had done this. I wonder if they had drafted this person, how would that have changed the roster? Well, if only the Bulls, could focus on bringing someone in that provides defense. And so I would like have these conversations with myself, or at least, other people who cared to have them. And so a lot of the ideas are just stemming from stuff I already think about or thought about before.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is hard to come up with topics because it's like, okay, well, I want to talk about stuff that people would actually find interesting and not just nonsense.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big fan of just talking about like, let's talk about NBA trade rumors and things like
Oh,
that. I mean, I address that here and there, but I think, there's a lot of just false sources and a lot of people that are just looking, for clickbaity type stuff. So I try to stay away from that and try to focus more on like the actual like analysis of the game
mhm.
and how it relates to the Bulls and what they can do to perform better going forward. And then the historical topics, a lot of how I came up with those was just stuff that I used to always think about, right? It's like um, one of the videos that I had was, would the Bulls have won a championship or championships had Rose not gotten injured? So I
Right.
made a video about that, like
Yeah.
how things would have broken down, with Rose not getting injured, and where the league was at that time, and the fact that they still had to go up against LeBron James, which would have been a challenge even if Rose didn't get injured. So that was one topic, and another topic I was kind of going over was like, what are the worst draft picks that the Bulls made,
Yeah.
throughout that time period, because it's something that I always thought about too as I was growing up. It's like every year, like you said, it was like, okay, well, who are we going to draft this year? And you
Yeah.
think that they're going to be an amazing player, and then it was like, okay, this guy ended up being a bust too. So that was like, I was like, oh, maybe I should like go through like all of the like recent busted draft picks that the Bulls had. So it just kind of like randomly comes to me. And when I think of an idea, I generally try to, jot it down somewhere, jot it down on my phone so I don't forget it later. Because it's not like I'm like always just working on it. It's like
Of
I
course.
might even be taking care of my daughter, and it might pop into my head like, oh, let me like just jot that on my phone real quick for later, and then I'll think about it at a later time.
Yeah.
And then as far as like, like when I am actually working on the videos, I create just like a very, high level outline. So I like remember what I want to talk about. Otherwise it would just be like all over the place, just so that it's a little more organized. And I just, kind of read through that from there as I'm discussing. And then, yeah, and that's really it.
So cool. So you have some notes that you write out as bullet points essentially, and then you go off of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's cool. That's
yeah.
cool. And I really enjoy the channel, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a Bulls fan and I'm your friend. It's actually some of the stuff is very insightful, and I actually never think about them because I think I'm more of just like the watcher, the fan, as when you break down the business side of it, and the coaching mistakes or even coaching pluses that we've done, and with Billy Donovan now, and everything that's been happening, and you even brought the recent one that you posted was the whole KD commentary
Oh yeah.
on the Bulls, and people were starting to start rumors, and you kind of kibosh that. I liked it. You were like, no, it just because he's talking about him doesn't mean he's gonna join the team. It's not a precursor.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. But to kind of segue, because I do want to cover your writing passion as well. Um, do you, considering that you wrote notes, first of all, are you working on any other books or any other writing projects currently?
I am, but it's very, very slow coming. Part of it is because I've obviously got a little sidetracked here with the channel that I've been
Yeah,
growing, but
yeah,
also now I have a child, which makes it even more difficult. So when I wrote that last book, that was actually um, before we had Eliana,
yeah,
and um, after we had Eliana, like I said, I already finished the book, but that was really just going through like the editing phase,
yeah,
which I had hired an editor, so they were doing more of that work, and then I would read through it. And it's also different when you have an infant child because they sleep a lot. And when you have a toddler, you have to be very much engaged with them while they're running around and trying to follow them, and that takes a lot of time. So yes, I am, but it's just been really, really slow coming,
yeah.
just because my time is pretty limited. But I do want to get back into it, and I think um, that'll probably be like a passion of mine, something that I'll really, really focus in on a lot more in retirement.
Uh,
Just because I think by that time, I'm sure I'll still have the passion for sports, but it probably won't be the same as it used to be because it's just like it's a young person, not a young person's passion, but like it takes a lot out of you to really like stay fully engaged and interactive with the team. And I think in retirement, I'll probably want to do something a little more relaxing. And for me, writing is very relaxing.
yeah, that's true. I with Space Between Us, did you uh how long would you say that process took from the moment you came up with the idea to write it, or the story behind it, and then getting that on paper or on computer, and then the whole thing, the whole nine? How did
Yeah, I mean, it was probably 3 years start to finish.
Wow, that's
Um,
actually not that long.
Yeah, I take that back. The idea, I came up with this idea when I was in college, but then I never worked on it. I like the concept of like writing your own book. Like how could I create an entire story from scratch?
Yeah,
And so I had the idea for the story that's in that book um, back when I was in college, and then life got away with me. I went to grad school. I started working, and I met my wife, and so and I just kind of put it to the wayside. And then I had a really, really long commute every day to work, and I was like, you know what? How could I make this commute a little more productive?
uh,
And so that's where I wrote it. I essentially just wrote out my BART ride every
no
day.
way.
Yeah, I mean, I did some work outside of it too. I worked a little bit here and there on the weekends and where I could. Like I had a really long airplane ride to India, and I worked on it a lot then because it's
Yeah,
a long plane ride.
yeah,
But most of the time that I worked on that book was on BART because I had a 1 hour commute one way every day. So
I remember that.
you work on it two hours 5 days a week. I mean, yeah, it adds up. So yeah, I would say 3 hours really start to finish. You start with an outline, and then based on that outline, I started actually like putting together the story itself. And then the editing phase took a long time too, because it's like
Yeah,
you write down all the stuff and then you realize, this doesn't really make sense. I need to revise this and proofread all that kind of stuff. That can take a bit.
that's cool, man. That's really cool because uh I feel uh I'm I'm always interested in like the mentalities it takes to do certain crafts, right? Like
Yeah.
um and even like personality types, right? Like I feel like um and at the risk of categorizing people into groups, because I don't like doing that, but um I felt like my niece is a avid reader. She'll read books like, she'll get
Oh,
through
okay.
she'll get through like a thousand, maybe 500-page book in maybe like 2-3 days. Like she can
Oh,
read.
wow. Okay.
She's
Yeah.
really, yeah, and I
Okay.
mean from a young age, from the days like in her when she was 5 or 6, obviously like more like childhood books, but I mean she's got like a full library, and she's only 16 now. But
Wow.
so anyway, and then you have her. She's super mellow, quiet, very like type B personality, but she's social, but not nearly to the degree as like her mom, which is my sister, or her sister, which is just like my sister, right? Like her.
Oh,
So
interesting.
like so my
And
younger
is
niece,
she younger?
the
The
younger
the,
one,
the
the
yeah,
younger one is actually the social one.
is the more
The,
outgoing one. Okay.
yeah, yeah, and she reads too. For the record, she also enjoys reading, but not nearly to the degree where the older one does. And anyway, I've asked her about writing, and she's told me like she was like, I think I could. I'm open to writing. She's not open to writing a book, but she's open to writing like articles and theses. Right? She's more into that line of work, and she likes law. Go figure, right? Reading. So, I mean that's your wife knows about that. So, but anyway, so my point is that um that's just two examples, but I've seen other people who are writers and people who are readers. um they tend to be more on that side, and they're very uh more usually a little bit more reserved. And they're more thinkers, or they think more, they like to imagine more, they create. It's a creative outlet, ultimately. And I consider myself a creative too, but not in writing. In music, yes, but not in
Music, yeah.
writing. Yeah, but like I can relate. Anyway, I'm going in circles. My point is that do you consider yourself uh more of a type A personality, where you would be because of the sports aspect, and how you love the Bulls and you love basketball, and you love the game, but you also love the business side, as we discussed. Or would you consider yourself a more type B that just happens to like the Bulls, the basketball?
I'm probably more type B.
Yeah.
Eh, I mean, obviously there have elements of type A personality, right? But I think at the end of the day, I'm more introverted.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
more I wouldn't say quiet. It's just that I do my best work when I'm just kind of by myself
Yeah.
and just focused.
Yeah.
And I don't, a lot of people feed off of energy from others.
Uh-huh.
I feed more off of energy of like alone time. I still like
Right.
that energy of seeing people, interacting with
Yeah.
people. But for me, that's where I get a lot of where I can recharge my batteries, right? That like
That's good.
alone time. And that's where
Yeah.
like my creative, juices, so to speak, really start flowing. But yeah, man, I agree with you, right? It's like we're all very creative human beings. We're
Yeah.
not just like wired to be purely analytical. I mean, there are some people that are like that, but I think everyone wants to have a creative outlet. And it's like you with music or like this
Uh-huh.
podcast. And for me, just talking about sports and having this channel and then through writing, those are my creative outlets.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean that's what I love about it. It's just it's a way to get away from like sort of the mundane every day to day job type thing. You know what I mean? It's like, and I
Yeah.
like my job. I don't have a bad job by any means, but it's like, it's work, and you're kind of doing a lot of the same stuff every day and interacting with the same people every day. And so to be able to have a creative outlet to express how you feel about things and do different things is really valuable to me, and it's something I really enjoy.
That's awesome, man. That's really it's really good to hear that you stick with the passions that you grew up with, because those are, I think, our purest sides, like our purest like characteristics, and I feel that
Yeah,
um life can get tough, and life can get busy, and life can become a distraction, and life can really take us away from
sure.
all of those things if we're not careful, right?
Yeah.
If we're not recognizing that. So that's where I was bringing the mental aspect of it all. Like it takes a lot of discipline, and I know that you have that, and um being alone is where you can really uh get your creative juices flowing. And um but like my point with all of that is that I think we all need that, and I think we're all put on this earth for a reason, and it's not just to work a 9 to 5 job, whether we love that job or not, by the way. right?
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's I think work is a virtue. I believe in that. I think work does teach us discipline. It does teach us about like adulting, as the kids say. But we still have the same kid that you were in the 90s, as was I. We had those more pure passions,
Yeah.
and like your passion for reading and writing, and then the Bulls, like all of that, and you're doing it now as an adult with a child of your own, and and that's great to see, because I think it's inspiring to younger kids, right?
For
Because
sure.
I feel like, well, first of all, your own child, right? I'm sure uh uh you've shared with her some Bulls games, and is she, would you consider her a basketball fan or not?
I think she's probably still a little too young.
Too young? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she's too. The thing is, she knows basketball, so
Yeah.
like if I'm watching it, she knows right away. She's always like,
Yeah.
basketball, but she's not that. I mean, she'll watch it for like a second here just because it's like, oh, it's something on a screen, and kids love their screens, and we try not to do so much screen time with her. So when she sees it, she gets excited. But then, you know, a minute goes by and she's already kind of on to her own thing. But my hope is that when she gets a little bit older, I'll be able to get her into it. And I think there's always the stereotype of like, oh well, you want a son to kind of raise and have them be into basketball. It's like, could easily, I get plenty of women that are into basketball that follow
100%.
sports. And so
I
I'll definitely be supportive of whatever she's passionate about. And hopefully she'll be a Bulls fan as well. And if not, that's totally fine too.
That's great, man. I think that's you're inspiring me from that
Yeah.
aspect, because we don't have kids yet, but uh I agree with you as far as like it doesn't matter whether it's a girl or boy. Like I mean, look at so many great WNBA players, so many great athletes that are females, and their
Yeah.
dads or moms. They actually, some male players were inspired more by their moms to go
Yeah.
into sports than their dads.
Yeah.
And so
For
that,
sure.
like Joakim Noah, for example. But
Yeah.
but anyway, um anything you'd like to plug before we wrap up our discussion? Other, obviously, Bull Central, so everybody jump on that. You got some writing projects in the works. I'm excited about what's to come in the near future or distant future. Anything else you'd like to plug?
No, man, this is great. I actually had a question for you. How'd you come up with Fumble Podcast?
Fumble
What's the
Podcast.
story behind Fumble?
All righty, I'll tell you that. And by the way, tight game at halftime, Bulls and
I know, I saw,
Grizzlies.
48-47, yeah.
48-47, yeah. So Fumble Podcast was, believe, I'm a thinker too. I think a lot. Unfortunately, I think a lot from
Yeah.
night to morning is my and and I know I need to probably see my therapist for this, because I wake up a lot. I wake up a lot of nights with a thought.
Okay.
It's a double-edged sword, because I got the name of this podcast from that as well, right? So
Okay.
I wanted it to kind of show me, but more important than showing me, when I wanted it to show humility, and I wanted to show togetherness. And so anyway, one thing led to another. I was like, how can I put all that into one and show a little bit of me, but also show like that it's not even about me, it's about togetherness, bringing friends, and eventually, if it goes far enough, people I don't know that I just know through that want to be on here, right? And I realized I was waking up, and I woke up with the thought, hey, there are fumbles in football, right? And then I was like, I like I like sports. Then I was like, why don't we play with that word, fumble, with the PH? That's where it came from. And then I didn't
Interesting.
even think about the humble aspect being hidden inside of the
Yeah,
word.
yeah.
So the P was more for Pej, and then I saw, oh, humble is in the word.
Humble.
If
So
I
that's why
spell
it's
it that way.
capitalized. Got it.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the I'm lowercase, the humility is uppercase for a reason. So that's my goal. I'm not claiming that I know what humility is or anything, but it's more of a the nature of the show is what I aim for it to be, right? And if you guys have been following my posts, whether it's on social injustice or the social movements that I post about, I always talk about humility and pure, and all of that happened before this podcast started. So just like you, I was passionate about it, but I'm passionate about a lot of things, and I didn't want the focus of this podcast to just be about social issues and just about, I wanted it to be about the person I'm talking to, right? And that could be anything. Like for us, for this episode, for example, we talked about sports. This is my first episode talking about sports.
Oh, nice.
It's not a secret that I'm a sports fan, but I mean, we've talked about everything, right? I mean, I spoke with Roz last week, and her episode is coming out tomorrow. And we talk about happiness in her episode. So,
oh, nice.
So, like it's by tomorrow, that means April 13th, but your episode will probably come out a couple weeks from now. But anyway, that's the short version of that story. I don't even think that was that
sounds
short,
good.
but yeah. Uh-oh, I hear her.
Oh God, I got a kid coming in.
All righty.
Hi, kid.
Here she
do you want to say hi real quick? Is
Well,
that all
sure.
right, man? You can edit it out if you need to.
No, it's cool, man. I don't know if she'll remember me
Come
though.
say hi. Come say hi.
Oh, my
This is my
Oh
kid.
my God! Hi,
Liliana,
Eliana.
can you say hi, Peshman?
Do you remember me?
Say hi.
You probably don't remember me.
That's a good
It-
wave. Yeah, you probably
Yeah.
don't. You haven't really seen a lot of people in the last year or so, huh?
I know. We were talking about basketball with your dad. You know how
Yeah.
much he loves
What? Wait, what do we say when we say basketball? What do you say when you say basketball? Say it.
The
Go
Bulls.
Bulls.
There you go. Well, that's a great way to bring this one to a close, man. Hey, I really appreciate you spending time. I know you're a busy man, and the fact that you put this aside, it means a lot to me.
For sure, man.
Thank you. And everyone, check out Bulls Central, and we're going to be following your posts, and I hope that becomes the job of the future.
One would hope, man. That would be amazing. We'll see.
Thank you, Jamaal. I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
man.
And we'll be in touch offline. Thanks again, man.
All right, thanks, buddy. Take care.
Together we'll purify the mind and have a good time. I'll showcase your very best on Fumble Podcast.